hey, check your energy level on what you are doing. And if your energy level is down, whatever, for 2 weeks, then check what you have done the last 2 weeks,
And now, your podcast hosts, Andre and Christian.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Connecting for Future, the podcast where we explore the intersection of technology, leadership, and the pressing global challenges that define our times. I'm your host Christian, and joining me as always, my co-host Andre Brusia.
Hi.
Today's episode is recorded in person again at the Vodafone Studios in Düsseldorf, and we have a special guest joining us today, Hartmut Mueller, Vice President and Chief Transformation Officer at ServiceNow. Hartmut is a true expert in global IT transformation.
Thanks for having me.
Very honored to have you here, Hartmut. And I think we met at your time at Mercedes-Benz. Now you're at ServiceNow. We will go a little bit into that. But before we look at your personal career path, let us start about talking about technology and technology trends. So what's your view on current tech landscape? What's the hottest trend out there?
Guess what? It's artificial intelligence. It's Gen AI, of course. I think, and to be frank, it's not new, to a certain extent. But I think adaptation actually, and also hardware, is able to cope with all that what software needs, so to say. And that's why Gen AI, I would say, is one of the key topics, especially large language models, and how you apply them actually towards certain domain across your value chain in a company, or even in a specific way on a certain domain. So, and I think that's of course one, we came from metaverse, over the last years, that's a bit going down, and I think Gen AI or AI is a true iPhone moment, which changed a lot.
Yeah, I think the very special thing about AI is that it affects everybody, right? There's something for everybody in it. Right?
Yeah, for me, it's about when you look to technology, and I think AI is a good example for that. It augments certain personas or it augments certain processes, in corp. And when you have that picture in mind saying, okay, it's augmenting something, it's augmenting a persona like myself, or it's augmenting a certain business process, then of course, on the one hand side, it disrupts, you have to think it completely fresh on greenfield. But it helps you as well also to overcome obstacles where you are having today, and I think that's a bit the picture I have in mind when I'm talking about technology. Of course, it's technology, but not for the sake of technology. It's really also about what is it for business, what's in for business, what's the value coming out, and how can it connect to value streams of a company.
This is why we started this podcast, because we always think that technology is there. The question is, how can it be applied to real life problems and challenges? Exactly,
yeah. And that's the key, Also, you have to invest, and it's investment protection on the one hand side, and also you have innovation protection to a certain extent, and that's why you have to be clear on the value which will come out.
Hartmut, your career has spanned some of the most iconic companies globally. Can you share a bit about your journey and how you found yourself at the intersection of technology and transformation?
That's a nice question, actually. Being at a certain age, you try to look back and you're not looking at front. So thanks for the question, Christian. No, actually, I started in career pretty early, So I was at a small company, small in consultancy. Then I moved to PricewaterhouseCoopers as a consultancy, and then to Daimler Chrysler Davis during that days. And it was very early in IT, and it was about, how to apply software towards corporates, And even in my first company, we did not have IT, It was about implementing it first, changing processes, changing personas, And that was also the thing where I would say it created a certain DNA, how I look on technology. And it's not, for me, it was never about it will endanger something. It was always about, hey, how might it help to get better, going forward. So, and that was also because I was at the system integrator side, I was at T-Systems, run also large managed service stuff. And then I changed to the customer side, was on Deutsche Telekom, CIO for the B2B business. Then I was the CTO of Mercedes, running technology. Recently, I joined ServiceNow as a platform company because I think platforms are a key, to innovate fast, and ServiceNow as a true system of action for hyper-automation, I think it's a great product, and it was also the decision I took saying, hey, it was great actually working for such a platform company, which everyone talks about.
Coming back to the tech stuff, you were talking about the metaverse earlier.
Right.
So from my view, it fell a little bit behind in the press that are mainly talking about AI. What are the chances, especially on the industrial metaverse, to become reality?
Yeah, and I think the good question, what you said, is there's a difference between industrial metaverse and consumer metaverse. And the industrial metaverse will stay, When you look to digital twins, the world of twins, how you create a digital value chain of your physical value chain, and simulate stuff towards that. And there, in that case, also many technologies are coming together, It's a convergence of technologies like cloud, like security, connectivity, mobility. And I think that will definitely boost productivity going forward, but it also speed up innovation, and save costs for companies. So industrial metaverse will definitely stay. So that's at least my belief in it. And also the technologies you are seeing, look, companies like NVIDIA, they are up through the roof, so to say, doing great stuff, but also companies like Epic with Unreal Engine. And so it's great stuff here.
From our view, AI can be help in many parts of the company. Is there a limit to artificial intelligence?
The question is, what do you see as a limit? I think, like I said at the beginning, for me, it's a bit augmenting, how can I augment stuff or how can I disrupt existing stuff? And of course, what you're currently seeing actually with Gen AI, creating results out of unstructured data, or even the co-pilot initiatives. A lot of companies have released their co-pilots, For me, it was in old IT speaking, in the past, there were wizards, I don't know whether you remember that. There was a wizard how to do stuff, which guides you through like a companion, so to say. And I'm saying Gen AI, of course, is completely disruptive, also with the hardware power currently available. And it helps really to think processes completely from scratch different. And I think that's also the attitude you should have. It's not about, okay, we add it to our existing brownfield like an additional ingredient. No, it's really about saying, how would it look like from greenfield, designing it completely new with that technology, And when you look to also to software development, I think GitHub Copilot is a good example, how to create code out of text, or even in the future apps out of text, and I think, or even out of voice, in the future. And I think that will speed up tremendously processes. Yeah.
A lot of people always see the risk associated with new technology instead of seeing the chances. How do we turn this around?
I think what I always said, actually, also had a discussion about blockchain, for instance, I think 2 years ago. And there was a discussion coming up, what is actually regulatory stuff? Does it help to adapt, or is it really endangering the overall progress in the technology? And I'm saying, it's like with AI. AI looked on it rather singularity, looked on that. Means you can't run AI without having a proper data strategy in place. You have to be clear how your data is classified, is your data actionable, accurate, And I think if you don't have a proper data strategy and also the right policies in place to govern that in your organization, then it's not endangering anything. Then it's rather creating process and regulatory stuff. And even that what the EU Act is currently doing, And when you look to regulation across the world, in certain areas, it speeds up adaptation. So that's what I believe, because then the guidelines are clear, you can experiment within the guardrails also. And I think that's a bit back and forth, And I think companies should be open to experiment. That's a cultural topic. You have to have the attitude to experiment. On the other hand side, you have to be clear what's your governance in your organization and what's your risk appetite. And according to your risk appetite, I think you set the guardrails even a bit tighter or a bit broader, So I think that's how I experienced it the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, that's a good way to see it.
Now we are facing also global challenges from the energy crisis to the war for talents. How do you see technology playing a role in addressing these challenges?
That's a nice question, war for talent, What I always have in mind is actually how can you learn or unlearn, in certain way. Because given speed of innovation, how to cope with that and be current, in your knowledge, what you are having as a worker, so to say, also, and be prepared for that. On the one hand side, we touched the topic AI, and AI, of course, will shift duties who are commodity more to whatever, digital agents, virtual agents, or even bots, or even self-service, So I think, and that means goes up higher value duties, and for higher value duties, you have to educate your people. And then it comes back to the question how you learn today and how would you learn tomorrow, given amount of information you will have available, when you compare that the last 10, 15 years. 10 years ago, you don't have that amount of information available which you can digest. And the question is how to digest. And I'm saying technology will help you to digest faster and to I would say, extract also the relevant information for yourself to learn and unlearn to a certain extent. And for me, it's not also the discussion, because war of talent means, okay, we have a shortage in what, So it means, are we able to be clear on how to distribute work according to workers and how to educate the workers accordingly, So, and I think, and that will shift, and that's a challenge also for companies to take care on that. What is relevant, what might be shifted out to a digital companion or a virtual agent, and what will stay, and how to educate people, in that journey, and what is the lifeline of a worker, of an employee, in a company, and how you support that by technology. I think that's a bit the things I have in mind.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's also a lot of fear of some employees, that technology makes themselves redundant or needed anymore. So I think there's a big pressure for the companies to take the employees with them on the change journey, and then make sure they know what their place is, and support them on the way. So is there a secret for you what to do to take the people with you and have a positive mindset towards change?
I think it's always, I think what's true, and where we have to be also very transparent, it's always about higher productivity, it's about efficiency, but it's also about speed of innovation, And that's, I think, the trade-off in which companies are. And of course, I think you have to reflect also your technical depth, I think also when you are a company, 10, 15 years, or 10, 50, 100 years in business, you have a certain legacy, which is not bad, but you have to acknowledge actually that you might not be cutting edge, and that you are carrying a technical depth also inside your organization. And if the technical depth is run by your people, then of course the people have also a technical depth which they have to overcome. That means legacy architecture equals legacy skills. So if you said that's the starting point, the point of departure, then it's really about how to overcome that. And that is, for me, rather a cultural topic, saying, how can I drive people out of sometimes their comfort zone to experiment, to learn, and even also to fail, and accept that in an organization, and to learn out of that what happened, So, and I think these are quick innovation cycles where you have to raise sometimes a question mark and saying, hey, do I have to kill my baby, because someone else did a greater job, or how can I build on someone else's idea to support that? It's a bit outward mindset you should have in terms of how can I support others, how can I train and educate people in a proper way, but how can I also create a cultural environment in an organization so that learning on the one hand side, experimenting, but also failing is not an issue seen, so to say. So that's at least a point I have.
Let's dive into the specifics. What is your view on the hottest technology trend right now?
It's of course AI, I think, and that change is a game changer, I think also, especially large language models, and I think on the one hand side, a lot of people are experimenting with OpenAI, ChatGPT and that stuff. On the other hand side, I think what really drives value, if you are clear on which domains you want to apply a large language model, actually helping you doing case summarization, something like that, easy stuff, and sometimes it's not rocket science what AI is doing, but it really supports you, and then you can really measure the value which is bringing, or what it is bringing, because I think we have to be clear on what value it creates, and for, I would say, a proper value management, you have to measure. You have to set up your metrics properly and say, hey, that's the thing I want to measure. And if efficiency is measured by reduced FTEs or freed up FTEs for other duties, then you should be also very honest in discussing that, I think, going forward. And of course, looking to service desks, for instance, where you have virtual agents, where you have chatbots, first call resolution will go up, with having AI in place and all that stuff. Of course, there will be less people doing that, to a certain extent. And that goes back to the question earlier, how to free up these people, and leverage them and use them for higher duties and higher value duties. And I think that's the key. For me, it's a bit, when you consider AI as part of a hyper-automation element, then it's how to deal with the after-automation effect. Because it was early days, you automate it by IT, suddenly you have 5 people free and say, hey, shit, how could that happen? Now we have 5 people, what to do with these 5 people? Then let's train them, rather being a bit foresighted, saying, okay, I look from the end on it and saying, hey, if I apply this, over a given time frame, okay, these 5 people might be freed up. So ideally educate them first, bring them into a training track and then use them for different stuff. And it has a bit to do also how we learn, train people, how we unlearn existing stuff so that it is not an attitude pattern which was built over 15, 20 years. And I think that's very important that we unlearn or even build back reflexes we are having, so to say, and learn them new, so it's a bit like that.
Are you also using ChatGPT a lot?
Yeah, of course. But it's more private thing, If you want to, I have a picture in mind saying, hey, ChatGPT is for me a bit a digital companion, If I want to have a very compressed information about some stuff, I ask, and you get nice information, and you can digest it quite fast. Or even if you have a document of 50 pages and saying, hey, let's summarize it to 200 words or so. It delivers, of course, sometimes different value and different quality, but it delivers, and I think that's the thing I'm experimenting a bit with.
Hartmut, we actually asked ChatGPT what the single most important question should be to be asked in this podcast. The output was, what pivotal moments or decisions in your career have had the most significant impact on your approach to leading transformative initiatives, and how can others leverage similar insights in their own professional journeys?
That's a very good question, actually, and it has also a bit to do with reflecting on what I've done, and it was a bit in terms of when I started accountability, and it was also in very early days, I wanted to make the organization I was into better. It was always a bit the aim, the intrinsic motivation to create a better organization out of it. Or sometimes it's saying what's better, but you say improve stuff going forward, And improving stuff going forward, or even applying some stuff to improve going forward, means you have to change something and you have to transform something. That's why I also like sometimes if people are talking about human-centric technology adoption, which means, hey, it is not for the sake of technology, it has to do with us as human beings. And of course, you have to apply it in a certain way, and you have to say, hey, what does it mean for each individual? And individuals are, of course, different, So, and what has it to do with each work step, in an organization or in a value chain? And I think reflecting that and saying, hey, the human is at the center, so to say, and around that it's technology, and around that is, of course, stuff like culture, like structure of an organization, which could be changed, or even the strategy, and the North Star given. That belongs together. For me, it's a bit of triangle, of strategy, culture, structure, the employee or the human being in the middle. And technology is changing that, and to a certain extent, sometimes you have to change only one element of the triangle, but sometimes you have to change all 3 elements. And that was always a bit pivotal in my career. I was also very clear in terms of how can I complement my journey in IT. So being a computer scientist, on education, saying, hey, you have to do everything, I was intrinsically motivated to run large managed service and data centers, even due to the fact that you have a lot of incidents when running thousands of customers, and it kept me awake also, of course. And it was also my motivation to say, hey, I want to be a CIO, defining a strategy and being very close and convergent also to business and understanding the business, because it was for me always very important to be in the interface between business and IT. And IT was for me also all over the entire career, it was never an organizational construct or a function. It was always, hey, it's either a capability you have or not, So, and ideally you have a capability, because if you have the capability, then you can talk about it. And if you don't have the capability, then better don't talk about it, So, so it's a bit that.
Yeah, and you have an impressive background, right? Just to highlight again, you led the IT transformation globally for Mercedes, right? You served as CIO for T-Systems. What is the kind of mindset to have just in regards to, for instance, to take something forward, to change jobs, right? So actually being as a CIO function, it would be also pretty comfortable staying in that kind of position, or going to Mercedes, right? So you're always driving, you're passionate. What is the mindset?
The mindset is a bit, I would say, you have to be clear on what is your personal belief, what is your attitude, and that translates into a certain behavior, and that's why I'm always saying my attitude was always to learn new stuff, So I was also getting a bit bored when I did 2-3 years the same stuff, I have to be honest, and I think that's why I'm also experimenting with new stuff like blockchain, I also, as an intrapreneur, founded a great organization in Mercedes with blockchain technology, for instance, or now dealing with AI technologies and checking what might digital twins do, or how would the digital companion look like for even an individual. So that was always stuff I'd like to do. It sometimes was even not said to me, hey, you have to do that. No, it was always intrinsically creating a lot of initiatives which combined efficiency on the one hand side, clear, also technology innovation, you have to build back also technical depths over time, educate people on that hand. And on the other hand side, also it's about driving completely new stuff on greenfield, because for me it was always clear, if you do it only on brownfield, you will not question the status quo. So that led me also to that what I'm today, because I like I'm not a title, but I said, hey, it's all transformation, what I have done over the last 20 years in IT for myself, for the clients I worked with, as a consultant or as a managed service provider, but also for the organization I headed, towards. It was always applying change to the organization. And that's also when I'm talking today to many CIOs, for instance, or even CEOs, saying, hey, what is IT actually for you and how you would perceive IT? What are the core elements of IT which you have to run in a company, and how you run IT in a company? And these are discussions I really like, because I learned a lot, I learned a lot the last 6 months being with ServiceNow. Companies think of even in one industry. And they are different, it's like you are, Vodafone.
It sounds like you really planned your career through. So do you think that a career path can be planned beforehand?
To a certain extent, I think not fully. But I had a great HR guy when I was 30, and he said a very important thing to me. He said, hey, Hartmut, don't focus on your blind spots or your white spots you are having, because when I was around 30, end of 2030, I was promoted to a senior manager, in Davis, Daimler Chrysler times. And my first intent was, hey, you have to be clear on your white spot, blind spot, let's fix them. So it was, and this guy said to me, Hartmut, it's not when you are becoming a leader, it's not about focusing on your blind white spots, it's rather focusing on your strength. So a very fast guy, going forward guy, but also being clear on that you complement your team according also what you need, So it's, if you always want to play offense, please ensure in your team that someone is playing defense.
That's great advice, Hartmut.
Yeah, and that's for me. That was for me one thing. And I think the only thing what I did once is, before I became CIO, I said, hey, I have to do infrastructure, because I came out of consultancy, software development, and all that stuff. And I said, I have to learn how networks, large data centers, infrastructure is working. And then I actively looked into such opportunities to take over large-scale business. And that was actually, these were the two pivotal moments where I had a bit in my career, which drove me into the direction I'm in.
Wonderful insights, Hartmut. Now let's spice things up a bit with our quickfire round. Are you ready for it?
Of course.
Quick fire round.
Easy one to start with. Bayern München or VfB Stuttgart?
Of course, VfB Stuttgart. Grown up in the area, been there, It's I think 45 years actually. I'm with the club, and this year they're doing extremely well. I love it. And
it's a good year for them, right?
Yeah. And Saturday I'm in the stadium against Bremen, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Question number 2: if you could time travel, would you go to the past or the future?
That's a good question actually, because grown up with Back to the Future actually movies, I would rather travel into the future, to see what is really, how would the world look like in 50 years or so, and even in a time where you normally not live anymore, that would be quite amazing.
Next one, what's your favorite tech gadget of all time?
So I now could say it was a data set in early days, with my Commodore C64, which I started, which was a nice thing, in early days. But I would really say, it's the iPhone or the cell phone changed really a lot, So, and it's really a rather digital companion when you look to what you are doing with that. And even when you go into a perspective saying it will be a way, if you won't have it, I could not imagine that I don't have a cell phone, or an iPhone aside.
Talking about the iPhone, what do you think is the usage in the future? Will it be text? Will it be still keyboards to enter stuff?
No, I think it's voice. It's voice. We're talking a lot of about voicification, Also, coming out of a car industry, voicification plays always a huge role, in how you communicate with the digital identity, which is a car, And everything will become a digital identity. So, and digital identities have to communicate. And of course, there have to be certain protocols, like blockchain, smart contracts and all that stuff. And I think that will come, no doubt about it. But it's, of course, voicification. Like, it's large language models, you have to understand, and you have to communicate. And the more digital identities are understanding you as human beings, the more it will be seamless, and I think that's my take going forward. Yeah.
And Hartmut, you're a busy guy, right? So however you are well in shape, how do you keep fit?
No, of course I did sports, in early, and I try sometimes to run once or twice a week, So going a bit to the gym. And even if you are traveling, I think you have to be mindful to yourself, saying how can you, on the one hand side, get sufficient sleep, at least 6 hours or so, and how can you build in some routines in your daily life, So because I think that's what you should be mindful on yourself, actually. And what I'm always doing is actually I'm checking my energy level, because it could be the last 3 weeks, for instance, I was heavy traveling, but it was still a full charged battery, When I came home, I was fully charged, It was not sucked out, so to say, after heavy travels, and it gave me energy, which is great, I would say. And that is also what I advise also to leaders in my organization, even to employees, say, hey, check your energy level on what you are doing. And if your energy level is down, whatever, for 2 weeks, then check what you have done the last 2 weeks, because it sucked out something out of you, and it should rather give you energy what you are doing, because then you are always full powered, so to say.
Yeah, I really hope this podcast really increased your energy level.
No, I like it. I love it, actually. And really, thanks for the invitation.
There's one last question we always ask in every episode of Connecting for Future, and that is, what is the most important advice you would give young leaders?
Stay curious, And one thing, what I learned over time, the higher you climb in hierarchy, the more likely you lead even more senior, more capable people. That means the more you have to listen to them instead of talking, because I also met a lot of leaders who tried to talk the entire time, where I said, hey, it's the opposite, actually. The higher you get, the more senior leaders you lead, the more you should listen, to them. And that's one advice, actually. And I think that means also guys will get curious, stay curious, also pick on ideas, build on ideas, keep living. And I think then it's a very fruitful environment you're creating.
Perfect. Powerful advice, Hartmut. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Hartmut.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, the future is connected, and together with the right technology and leadership, we can shape a brighter tomorrow. Thank you so much, your podcast hosts, Andre and Christian. Keep connecting.